hopefully you are able to be safe. If you want to call in the show, you may call us at area code 323 962 1937 if you want to talk sports. And if you just want to say hello, you can call in as well. And so, we're going to kick the show off today with a little breaking news, a little breaking sad news. We're going to do it without the music. And of course, we're talking about the death of the kid. Gary Carter was one of my favorite baseball players when I was growing up back in Yonkers, New York. The 1980s Mets teams were my favorite baseball teams because a lot of those guys on those teams were my age group, were people who sort of were growing up as I was growing up. I mean, Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden were only 3 years older than I, and Gary Carter and Keith Hernandez were the leaders on that team. And in 1986, when the Mets won the World Series, Gary Carter, had a great season. He wasn't the reason why the Mets won, but he was certainly one of the cogs and one of the key players into their success. And unfortunately, today he lost his battle with brain cancer, and it's a sad day for us because one of the great lines ever said was said, I believe, by Bob Costas, or it might have even been Billy Crystal. I can't remember who said it exactly, but they were talking about when, as we grow older, and some of our childhood heroes and people we admired when we were kids growing up start to move on to a different phase of their mortality, it starts to eat away at our childhood. And losing a Gary Carter to me, takes, brings me back a long, long time ago. I was a Yankee fan as a little boy. I used to love me some Reggie Jackson. And when the Yankees traded Reggie Jackson out here to the Angels, I hated the Yankees, and I've not been a Yankee fan since. But my very first baseball game that I ever saw, I believe it was a Mets game, and became a big Mets fan after the Yankees got rid of Reggie Jackson, and then of course they added, the Strawberries and the Goodins, and the Keith Hernandezes and the George Fosters and the Felix Millans and the John Stearns of the world, the people who Rusty Staubs, and I just became a bigger Met fan than I was any sport. And in fact, if you've ever seen me on that Sports Geniuses show that I was on, I was asked what was my favorite sports team, and I automatically say without reflex is the New York Mets 1986 team. Even more so than the New York Giants football team of 1986, who had, Lawrence Taylor, who was my favorite player. But the 86 Mets team was a significant team to me. And in fact, being out here in California, a buddy of mine out here, Phil Messerer, who, he's a director. He just filmed this movie called Underbelly Blues. That's you all should get to see one of these days. It's very funny. He basically, for Christmas a few years ago, he got me a baseball mug of the 1986 baseball Mets team that he got on eBay that had the names and the scores of all the games of the playoffs and the World Series, and a tremendous keepsake that I still have with me to this date. And Gary Carter's death to me is pretty sad because I love that team. The Mets in that year in '86, they beat everybody up. Teams were scared to play the Mets that year. I mean, they would go into your town, go into your city, take your women, take your booze, take whatever they wanted from you. Kick your tail on the field, take your fan base, beat you up in the base paths, charge them out, beat up your pitchers. I mean, they just ransacked everybody. And then the Red Sox gave them all they can handle in the World Series, and the Red Sox fans feel that that should have been their first championship in the decades. But it was Gary Carter's hit, who started that rally when the Mets were down 5-3 with 2 outs, and the crowd, chanting, come on, trying to get us back into the game. And the World Series, they announced that Bruce Hurst was going to be MVP of the World Series before the Red Sox even won the game. And then Gary Carter got the base hit, and then all hell broke loose, and the Mets were able to win that Game 6, and then in Game 7, Ray Knight got the big hit to break the tie, and then Strawberry finalized it with the home run and gave us our championship. The only one the Mets have won since '69. And it's even ironic, too, in the '88 season when the Mets played the Dodgers in the postseason, and the Dodgers had that magical year with Gibson and Hershiser and so on and so forth. Well, people don't remember in game one of that postseason, it was a 2-2 game going into the late innings, and it was Gary Carter who got the big hit to give the Mets a 3-2 victory in that game. I mean, Gary Carter, he should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. He didn't cry over it. He basically said, he'd get in at some point, and 6 years later he did. So it's a sad day. It's sad listening to stories. I guess Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden have been counting stories about Gary Carter over the last couple of hours. And you think if Gary Carter had any more impact in their lives, maybe their careers would not have been what it was. I mean, if you think about that 86 Met team and that era between 85 and 90, only one Met player is in the Hall of Fame, and that's Gary Carter. Not Doc, who was on pace to go to the Hall of Fame, and not Darryl, who, he was clearly one of the three best players in all the game. Only Gary Carter from that team is in the Hall of Fame. So, all you Met fans, you true Met fans, I'm seeing on Facebook, a lot of you guys are making your comments about Gary Carter. Gary Carter, he was a significant baseball player in the New York lore of baseball. I mean, he's no Mickey Mantle, he's no, Joe DiMaggio, Yogi Berra, but he did lead this team. He did lead that pitching staff. He didn't take no mess on that mound. I mean, Dwight Gooden was telling stories today about, Gary Carter came out to the mound to talk to him on the mound and tell him to throw strikes. He knew that it was time. So, I know right now in New York we're celebrating Linsanity, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But take a moment and think about Gary Carter and his family. He succumbed today at the age of 57 to brain cancer. May he rest in peace. And we'll be back on 89.7 KLAS FM to talk NBA after this.
LendingTree.com